Welcome to the Write Like a Badass podcast. Jessica Glass is an elementary school teacher in Texas. She has been teaching children for 6 years after earning a degree in English with a minor in technical writing from the University of Texas at Arlington. Jess has also worked as an assistant editor and content creator for trade magazines. She has two cats, a German Shepherd, and a husband, not necessarily in that order of importance. She she loves reading and is really into the fantasy genre. She enjoys hiking, kayaking, playing ukulele, singing, and she's kind of obsessed with mermaids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jess's short story, The Bed of Roses, was published digitally as an ebook. Bed of Roses is a retelling of Sleeping Beauty from a male character's perspective. Interesting. Her current project is what we're going to be talking about today. It's another reimagining of a fairy tale, Snow White and Rose Red. Welcome, Jess.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Now, you have been working on this novel since high school. That is a very ambitious goal for a high school student. What got you started on this?
I always wrote. I always liked to write. It was just something that I've always done, whether it was journaling, whether it was just, just writing ideas down for show. I was in musical theater. I would a lot of times like write plays and stuff like that with my friends. So it was just something I was always doing. And I remember specifically that this just idea came and popped into my head, and I wrote the first chapter back when I was in high school. And then I kind of put it away for a while, and I hadn't gone back to it. I hadn't think about it, but I remember it was just I had a very vivid like imagining of this chapter, and I was like, this would be really cool. And then I put it away for a while, and I didn't return to it until probably I was in college. But it was something that I've just been working on periodically in times of my life. I'd go back to it. I would get busy. I would put it away. Then I'd return to it later. So it's just been an ongoing project that I've had for a while, and it was just something that came to me when I was in high school, and I was like, I really like this. I want to write it down, and I just kind of have been working on it ever since.
It's like an old friend who's always there
Yeah.
for you, even if you aren't in touch that often.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah. It was just one of those. Yes, exactly. That was exactly it. And describe the writing process of it.
Huh. Now, I know this is a work in progress, but what can you tell us about it?
Well, it is as you said, it is a reimagining and a retelling of the Grimm's fairy tale of Snow White and Rose Red, not Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but a different fairy tale from Grimm's that was called Snow White and Rose Red. It's originally about a two girls that are living in the woods with their mother, and then they meet a bear who turns into a prince and ends up marrying one of them, and then the other one sort of gets her own prince type of thing. And it's very and that's basically the Grimm's fairy tale version of the story. And I just took this, and I just thought it was really interesting the way that they would describe the two characters of Snow White and Rose Red as sort of like these complete opposites in the Grimm's fairy tale. One is more has red hair, the other one is Snow White because she has the white skin. And I was just like, how interesting that two stories like this exist that have two characters that are both named Snow White and sort of in the same realm of these characters who live in the woods and who end up marrying this prince. Like, how did this get started with this folk tale and this folk story? Because Grimm's brothers documented so many different types of stories that were sort of similar in the same veins and stuff like that. But I just always thought that that was a really interesting one of them, and it was similar and yet not similar to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So I thought that was really interesting, and I was like, well, what if the characters were kind of they're very similar, but at the same time they're not similar, and let's play around with that dynamic with the two sisters. I also just thought it was really interesting that like they just let a bear into their house and they're totally okay with it, you know, as folk tales do and stuff like as they do in folk tales. They have these very anthropomorphic characters who like are reimagined and meant to tell this lesson or whatever it is. But I thought, well, what's that relationship got to be like? What's that look like? So I just started reimagining it and doing it. And as I got more and more into it, I was like, for the idea that I want to do, I really need to do maybe another part of the story where there's something that happens on with characters in the past. And it just started getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the project just started evolving, and the plot line got more and more intricate. And so now I'm sort of writing this other portion of the book of what happens in these woods and in this town and in this kingdom, sort of before the whole thing with Rose Red and Snow White happened. So it's gotten very ambitious.
I have to say I'm surprised. I did not know that there was another Grimm's Brothers Snow White story that
Right? It's
Disney has not
interesting.
gotten its copyright hooks into yet.
It is, yes, it is very interesting, and you will see sort of elements that in there's this one movie, and I wish that I could tell you what it was, but there was one time that I saw, like, I want to say it was some indie film that sort of combined the two stories where the prince actually turned into a bear. And that's kind of how I first learned about it when I watched this thing, and I was like, what is there a bear doing in Snow White? So I started looking up some different stories from Grimm's Brothers fairy tales, and they said, oh, there's this other version where there's actually a bear, and the prince is actually a bear in this version. So I just thought that was really interesting, and I love the idea of, sort of like of spirit animals and having interactions with animals. And I just thought that was interesting, and I just thought, okay, here's a reimagining that I can do that's not sort of like the McGuire's reimagining, who have already done some version of novel of Snow White. Here's something that I can do where it's still a classic retell, it's still a reimagining of the Grimm's fairy tales, which we see a lot throughout fantasy literature, but it's something that's a little different. So that's what gravitated me towards the story, basically.
You seem like you're a very patient writer. This is, I think, your third major revision that you're on.
That is.
Where do you get the staying power?
um, I honestly, a lot of it has to do with because it's taken me so much time to write it. I think is why I'm heavy into revisioning, because I've spent so much time in between the project. um, and I basically write when I can. I'm busy. I'm a teacher. And there's been a lot of like things going on as far as that goes in the middle of the school year. So sometimes you come home from work and you don't have the power or the bandwidth to write, because as you know, writing, it takes a lot of your mental power. As a teacher, we're making, what was the statistic, I think in the 80s, that it said that you're making over like 1,500 decisions like in the first 3 hours of your morning or
Wow.
something like that. So by the time you get home, you're exhausted. And it's sort of hard to find that mental energy to continue on with something like a big writing project like that. So I definitely find that, as I've began writing, there are things I want to go back and revise. There are things that I want to go back and perfect, because I've written it over such a long period of my life. I've written it in high school, I've written it in college, I'm now writing it into an adult in my 30s. So it's something that I'm constantly revising, something I'm perfecting. I hope that the long writing process will be worth it in the long run, and that the finished product will be something good.
Well, what happens when you're finished? What do you plan to do with it? Are you going to seek a literary agent, or are you going to self-publish?
I would like to try and seek a literary agent first. Just because I liked the process the first time. It was something with when I was first published and with my short story. It was one of those things where one of my writing professors actually knew this publishing house, and they were like, you should submit this. And they know me there. Like, I bet they would read it, and I got published that way. So it was one of those things where I didn't really have to go to a literary agent first. It was one of those things where I submitted it to the publishing house, and they were like, it's great, we're going to publish it on ebook. So I kind of lucked into that. So I'd like to go to the route and see what that process is like first. I would just kind of like to explore that process and see if I like it, see if it's something that I'm willing to do, if I can, if they think that there's an audience for me in those areas. I would love to try and explore that, but I'm also not opposed to self-publishing either. If I can't get it through I go through the normal publishing route.
There are such pros and cons to both. I mean, with
Yeah.
trad publishing, better marketing, better distribution, not necessarily better promotional support, because these days a lot of authors have to do that on their own.
I found that too interesting during the writing process when I was first published in an ebook, the several years ago, is that there wasn't a lot of promotion. It was a lot of the self promotion for my short story was definitely left up to me and my end. So that was I agree with that, and it's good to know that that hasn't changed.
Well, and when we were setting this up, you mentioned that you don't necessarily have a lot of social media coverage of what you're writing, and it is a work in
So,
progress. I'll
mhm.
tell you, when I approached literary agents, I got representation. They went to publishers. The first question the publisher asked was, "Does she have a platform?" They
Mm,
want you to have followers. Ah, and of course,
gotcha.
at that
Something I
time,
should
I
put on
did
my
not.
to-do list.
On your to-do list. But it also takes an awfully long time when you go the trad route. I mean, it could
It
be
does.
2 years from when you sign that contract to when your book actually is available for readers.
That's a long time. Yeah, that's a long time. Then that's more time after I've written it. So that'd be interesting that's interesting to know that it takes that long to actually get from there to publishing as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not trying to be a downer, but
No, I mean, I've waited this long. I mean, what's another couple years?
uh, I want to veer off writing for just a minute because I
Mhm.
love the fact that you're an elementary school teacher. I
Oh, thank you.
remember all my favorite teachers from kindergarten on, the ones who really made an impression on me and an impact on the way I thought about things. What subjects do you teach?
I am currently teaching in a Head Start classroom, and I teach all the subjects. And I'm also SPED certified. So right now I am working with special ed children in that sort of blended area classroom. But that's basically who I work with on my own on the day-to-day basis is as I work with kids with special needs, but in a gen ed setting. So I'm sort of an inclusion teacher, but just for pre-K.
And the other question I was leading up to with that is, how do you convey the love of reading to children?
So I have actually recently this year started using some AI platforms to generate images for my own children's books that I use in my classroom. So that's something that I can do to really tailor and make the experiences more personal for them. For example, we have a social emotional support animal who comes onto our campus. It's a wonderful French bulldog named Bayou. So in order to get the kids prepared for that experience, we read a classroom book about Bayou that I wrote and had made images for, all about Bayou coming to visit in the classroom. So it's teaching them social emotional learning skills, basically, and getting ready and prepared for that new transition of meeting this new friend to come into the classroom. And it was very successful. And it was really, really fun to see them engaged and going over to the book in our dramatic play center and like reading it all the time and being like, there's Bayou. Remember, we can't do this with Bayou because if we do that with Bayou, we might scare Bayou. You know, it was really, really fun to tailor their learning and use the words that they're learning in the book in order to get them more engaged with the material. So that's something that I've been doing a lot to help.
And you wrote this or you used AI to write it?
I wrote the words myself. I am not an artist, but there were some really great things that you can do with AI now to in order to generate like simple images and stuff like that. So I generated images of Bayou in this classroom going to visit them, which I am not. Which I know is a whole nother debate that we could probably have in a whole separate interview on about using AI images for that. But for classroom applications and purposes, when teachers are limited on time as it is, it's a wonderful way to create and make these really engaging visual pieces that really help young early childhood learners to engage in the reading process and make it tailor-made and something unique for them. It's also great for like making visuals for special education children for their goals that they're working on in school as well.
I bet those kids are lucky to have you as their teacher.
Thank
Oh my
you.
goodness. And you're so animated. A video of this will be on YouTube and people should go and watch it to see how much you use your hands.
Oh,
I don't
yes,
even
I
think
do
you're
all the
Italian,
time.
are you?
I'm not Italian, but Italian at heart, I guess.
I know, it's funny. Well, we were talking earlier about how difficult sometimes it is for you to squeeze in enough writing time. But you had something life-changing happen to you last year that really, really took a toll on your time. You were in an accident, and to the extent that you would like to discuss it, can you tell us about that and
Sure.
maybe how it affected your writing and your other creative pursuits? You did a lot of things.
Sure. I basically, towards the end of last year, it's actually coming up on the year mark, actually, May 8th, so this Friday, I was walking my dog. Um, the disclaimer, the dog is fine. I always say that at the beginning for animal lovers. But I was walking my dog. I was crossing the street. I came to my intersection on my road. Car was stopped at the stop sign, waved to him. It was early in the morning, it was visible. And then I went to cross the street. He started to accelerate, stepped back on the curb, waved again, make sure he saw me. I thought he acknowledged me, started walking, and then he hit me with his car. So that was, and dog is fine. Everybody always asks first, is the dog okay? Dog was fine. Dog maybe had a scrape on his nose. So I ended up breaking up my shoulder and then my talus bone in my ankle. So that was obviously put me out of commission for the rest of the school year. I'm a lot better now. It was definitely a shocker, and it was the thing that was probably the worst about those two injuries is that I had to be in a wheelchair for about 3 months. So that was
Oh my
that was
gosh,
tough.
that's a long time.
Yeah, it was a while. It was hard for me personally because I'm a very active person, as you said, from all of my interests and stuff like that. So it was definitely an eye opener in that way, for to be immobilized for a while. As far as how it has affected my writing, it honestly was probably a one thing that kind of saved me throughout that time is that I could write, and it gave me the time to actually sit down and write. I wrote probably the most I've written in years when I was just recovering and laying in my bed on my laptop. So that was sort of a blessing in disguise, I guess, and the silver lining out of all of it is that I was able to write a lot and really focus on that project, and really get ahead on this third draft that I'm working on.
We hear again and again that creativity can be a healing force, and it certainly
It
sounds like it
really is.
worked that way with
Absolutely.
you because you had to take time off from work during your recovery and the
I did, yes. I had to take off basically the rest of May and a little bit into September, in order to make a successful recovery, in order to come back to work. Because as you know, if you know elementary teachers, it's a physical job when it's younger kids. You have to do a lot of bending down, you have to do a lot of crouching, you have to do a lot of playing, you have to do a lot of lifting, climbing, stuff like that with the kids in order to keep up with 4-year-olds.
I
Yeah.
can't even imagine all that.
Oh
Um,
yeah, it's
are you
fun.
fully recovered now, do you think?
I mean, yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's still a little bit of limited mobility in my ankle. There are definitely things I'll have to adjust and get used to for the rest of my life. But I mean, I'm just happy I walk. I
Oh,
walk. I have full mobility of my arm. That's really the main things that were really worrisome to me. The walking thing it's getting better and better. It's still swells from time to time, but we are on our way.
it's a good thing you're young and you can be resilient.
Yes. I'm glad it happened at this time and not another time.
Let's get back to your novel. Who are your readers? I was assuming that your novel is for grown-ups. Is that correct?
I would think, I mean, right now where I'm at, I'm sort of toying in the middle of like maybe of adult readers and maybe YA, maybe young adult fiction, depending on how dark I go with it. I think right now where it was and what I have written, we could maybe go young adult literature just from the things that I've been reading recently. I'm like, this could probably almost fit in. It's like young adult has gotten to the point where it's almost adult in some books, like not to that it's too much or anything like that, but they're dealing with subject matters that I think are things that usually adult fiction used to deal with and only adult fiction would deal with, where I'm seeing YA being coming a lot more nuanced and a lot more respected, if that makes sense, for just in my personal opinion, just from what I have seen and what I've been reading with YA, which I obviously read a lot of YA because of the job that I do. I'd like to see what the trends are and see what things are going. I have a lot of librarian friends as well who recommend things to me periodically from time to time, in YA lit. So yeah, I think it could go either way right now. I'm kind of leaning towards I would be kind of nice to reach a YA literature just because of what I do. I think that would be kind of cool if I skewed more YA.
A perfect tie-in.
Yeah.
Who are some of your favorite authors?
So I'm heavily influenced right now. Anne Rice is one of my favorites.
Oh, yes.
By far, Anne Rice is one of my favorite.
Except that the witch one that was 900 pages and had no closure because it was going to
Oh,
be a series. I resented the ending of that.
Yes, that was very
Ugh.
sad. That was very sad. I agree with that. And some of the like vampire books that came out beforehand, I was like, they aren't the same caliber as the other ones, but it's okay. I still love you, Anne Rice. But yeah, Anne Rice was always one of my favorites. I also really like the fantasy writer Robin Hobbs. If you've ever read her Assassins trilogy, and some of her other books that are coming out. She's one of my favorites. I think she's fantastic. She's probably got some of the best character development I've ever seen written for a fantasy genre. Who else do I love? I've a lot of different people. I'm an English major, so obviously the Bronte sisters are obviously are big influence. I really enjoy romantic gothic themes, but the Bronte sisters are probably again what I would say is up there. Emily Dickinson,
Oh, yes, of course.
of course.
As a fellow English major, I approve of this message.
You approve of this list. Good.
Now, Jess, your husband Cody is also a writer, and so he apparently gives you feedback as you're writing along. What's that?
Yes. He's been a really good I would say in quotations he's a really good editor. He's read my first draft and he lovingly pointed out to me that I had no antagonist in my first draft, and you're like, and I was just like, what? No, I do. And it's like, no, you don't. You don't have an antagonist in this book. You need an antagonist, and he was extremely right. In my first draft had a lot of issues, and he was very good about giving me feedback with those, and he's very good at especially with plot points. He's the person I go to when I'm like, okay, does this make sense? Or he'll be the person to say, you need to change that if it comes to when it comes to plot. He's very, very good about giving me feedback on that.
So he's pretty blunt. Wow.
Extremely, yes,
You
and
know,
that's good. And for me, that's a really good thing.
oh, yes. And first drafts are supposed to be rough drafts, for heaven's sake.
Absolutely, yes, for sure.
I know it's probably a little early to ask this, but what's next for you? Is there going to be a novel about mermaids coming?
I would love to eventually do a book about mermaids. Yes, that's another one that I have had in my mind for forever. Again, probably since high school. I have always wanted to write this book about mermaids. I have ideas for it. Now that I'm older, I think that there might be different directions I go with it. But yes, I would love to do a book about mermaids someday. That's one of those projects too. I'd really love to get into the research of it. I really love find the folklore, as you can tell from my subject matters of liking the Grimm's fairy tales and everything. I'm also into the like linguistics of Grimm's law and everything like that, about everything surrounding the Grimm's brothers and their work. I'm really into like the entire language aspect of it, and like how folk tales really influence language that we use even today. So that's something that I would really like to explore in the mermaid book as well.
Okay, back the truck up. What is Grimm's Law?
Grimm's law is basically it's a theory that the Grimm's brothers coined that dealt with the Germanic shift, basically, of the different consonants that were used in German, and then that influenced English from today. So it's basically like the consonants and the basic sound shift that some letters took, like PH. I think became like I think like GAG turned into PH or something like that. I can't remember. Don't dictate me on this, linguist.
Don't
It's
come for
been a
her.
while, but how that sort of like how that shift sort of influenced the language, and also in that their retellings of these stories basically, and how they wrote things down, because they had many different versions of these folk tales that were published first in like 1812 all the way spanning I think to 18, what was it, like 20, like 1816 or something like that. They had a few different versions that they published of it, and you can sort of see like how their theories sort of influenced and played how they reused the language in the different retellings of those stories, if that makes
I'm glad to learn something new. I
sense.
did have a recent episode in which a guest was talking about how fairy tales, Grimm's fairy tales, originally were quite dark, and parents complained.
Yes, they were.
Is that part of the appeal for you?
It is. It's one of those things too that I find really fascinating about how we teach these things to these fairy tales to children, but they weren't necessarily for children when they started off. These were tales that sort of encapsulated things that normal people were going through at the time, and the way that they sort of related to the world and the world around them, very much like mythology. It was basically a way of like describing life lessons and learning something through the literature and through these stories that they told through word of mouth. So it was definitely not geared to children, but it's interesting how modern audiences took them and then did gear them for children. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with the first retelling of Cinderella, but it's extremely gruesome. It's extremely
No,
violent.
tell me what happened.
So basically, in Cinderella, instead of like the stepsisters trying on the shoe and it not fitting, they would cut their toes off to try and make them fit.
Oh,
Then and like they were just and they're describing it and like they get into the prince's carriage and then the princess notices that their feet are bleeding. I mean, it's just like
oh,
yeah, some nasty stuff. I think they also end up getting their eyes pecked out at the end of some of the versions in Grimm's fairy tale version. That's their like they're that for being bad people they have their eyes pecked out. So I mean,
that is harsh. Boy, have they gotten sanitized over the
it's gotten very
century, over
sanitized.
the
Yes,
decades. And if
yes.
I recall, didn't Hansel and Gretel have a terrible ending? Either they went in the oven or the witch went in the oven. Somebody died at the end of that
The
one.
witch went in the oven, and that's one that kind of has stayed consistent, which is I've always thought is hilarious. Is that the witch always ends up getting in the oven, but yeah, she's trying to cook the children.
Yeah, I know, but they knocked at her door. I mean, I've got
Exactly.
no soliciting sign up. Somebody who knocks on my door, I'm going to put them in the oven too, naturally. Or maybe
Man,
not.
so I'll tell Goldilocks to not come to your house too.
No, no. Now, I ask this question of every single guest that I have on. What advice would you give to other writers or to people who want to write? Maybe who are, back there thinking, oh, I've got a story idea, but could I really do it?
I mean, that's a good question. I think that it's a hard one to answer too because everyone's writing style is so personal and so different, and their process for writing is so different. But my main thing would be I've learned that there is a time to force it and there is a time not to force it. When those times come where you just don't feel like anything's coming, listen to that instinct and let it go for a little bit. That's just what I've learned. That's what I've learned with this writing process. Is to that there are definitely times where you have to step back and take away from that and from a project and then return to it later. As I've shown with my 3 revisions over high school to now, it's something that hasn't happened naturally, and for my personal writing process I like it to have moments where it happens naturally. That doesn't mean that I don't try and actively write. I definitely have started to try and at least do it once a week whatever is going on in my thing, but if it's just not happening, I think just don't let it happen and it will come.
That's interesting because a lot of writers, myself included, need to set goals or deadlines for themselves to kind of
Mm-hmm.
push themselves along. And it sounds like you are not deadline driven.
I am and I'm not. In my work life, I am very deadline driven because this is a personal project that I've been working on for so long, and it's something too that I'm kind of a perfectionist. I do struggle with I do struggle and I'm really critical of my writing. That's something that I think for me has been helpful is not putting a time limit on it, because I think it helps my process and helps my writing not it makes it makes me feel better, and it makes I think my writing better if I'm not rushing it in this case.
That's true, but I want to do a first draft, complete the first draft of my current work in progress by my birthday, June 21st, and I'm hanging on to that. And I'm not really making much progress, sort of. So I'm not sure that the deadline establishing is helping me all that much. But
I think, yeah, and I think it depends on the phase of your life you're in. And I think that's what's been interesting about this project too, is that, there have been times where we're setting deadlines and setting goals have helped me achieve those goals. Like I set out after I had this accident, I set out being like, this is my excuse to start writing. I can't put it off any longer. And the creative juices flowed and it was wonderful. School started back up again. I've kind of had to put it on the back burner for a while, but I am definitely looking at summer and I'm being like, okay, I want to be finished with my third draft by the summer, and hopefully proofreading by the end of the summer.
oh,
So
that's true. Yeah, as a teacher, you do have a lot more time in the summer.
yes, exactly. So that's also really beneficial for me, is finding big gaps in my schedule. And usually, during breaks and stuff like that is when I tend to pick it up and write and use it again. And then like, periodically on the weekends. But when I have long breaks, that's usually when I tend to get most of my writing done.
Well, the whole goal of this podcast is to give information and inspiration to writers. Is there anything you'd like to add? I
Hit me up if you want if you want to talk about writing or have any advice for me about the writing community and publishing, basically, because that's definitely something that I wanted. But what my goal was for going on this podcast was getting me more involved in the community of writing and getting me more in touch with writing. So hopefully I'll be more inspired to do it.
There is an enormous online writing community. It's very active, it's very supportive of each other, which is what I really like. So, yes,
Yeah.
I will connect you with people.
Thank you.
I
I
sound like
appreciate that.
such a pro. But no, I've enjoyed getting into that community and really sort of meeting a lot of people through it. People I'll never get to meet in real life, unfortunately, but it
Yeah.
helps me.
That is helpful. And even if you don't read them in real life, yeah, it's nice to know that they're out there and that you just a click away and that you can get some inspiration and talk to people about things that they're having problems with their writing process and their issues. Yeah. Because that's something I really want to focus on more is like trying to find my writing process in something that's more consistent and less sporadic.
Sporadic might be your style.
We'll see.
I'm
It might
amazed.
be.
I go online. I get discouraged because I go online and people are like, I wrote 5,000 words today. I
Yeah.
wrote 3,000 words this week. And I'm like, I didn't do that.
I'm glad I'm in the same boat then.
We're not alone. I'm
Good.
sporadic. Well, thank you so much for making the time to talk with me today. I
Of
appreciate
course.
it.
Thank you.
With your busy schedule and between your ukulele playing and your singing and everything else that you do, for heaven's sake.
Oh, thank you.
And
No, I appreciate you having me. It was an honor.
I am so glad that you recovered from that terrible accident.
Oh,
Whew.
thank you.
Yeah.
Me too.
All right. We'll have to have you back on when you finished your novel, when it's
That'll be
all
my
done.
goal.
Okay. We'll have
Sounds
you
good.
back and
Help
we
me
will
promote.
salute you and you can tell everybody how you managed to do it and how it's being published.
That sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, Maureen.